First of all, I hope everyone is doing well. I'd like to offer you my greetings. And today I'd like to take this opportunity to wish all of you Tashi Delek for the new year of the Iron Ox. I hope that in this new year you will all be well, that we accomplish all you wish, be happy and be healthy and live long. For the next 4 weeks, starting from today, I will speak about 2 autobiographical praises by Mikyo Dorje, the good deeds and praises entitled He Searched Thoroughly. Normally we have a Gunshe, but now we're having it in the spring season, so we're calling it the Spring Teachings. And so I think maybe it would be good if we just leave the name as the Spring Teachings. The reason this is that everyone is all rushing to have Gunshas or winter teachings, but there's no one who has any spring teachings or summer teachings. So I think maybe in the future we should change it and call it the spring teachings, not the winter teachings. But we haven't decided for sure. Now, my principal motivation or reason for choosing these texts as the Dharma to teach is that among all the incarnations of the Gyeongsang Karmapa, the one whom people who study the great philosophical texts often feel the most affinity for is the 8th Karmapa, Mikyo Dorje. And the reason for this is not just that he wrote commentaries on the Middle Way, Prajnaparamita, Vinaya, and Abhidharma. It is also because he used the power of his own diligence at learning and the power of his intelligence to write many complete and unerring explanations of the intent of the sutras and tantras, the assertions of the great texts, the view meditation of the conduct of Kagyu masters of the past, and so forth. So I think that it is his kindness that it's not only the Karma Kamsam, but also all of the Dakpo Kagyu can go along together with the other Tibetan schools holding their heads high. And so I think he's the mostly because of his kindness. Now, someone like me, I'm not really a scholar who has specialized in the study of history and biography, and I don't have a wide perspective. But over many years, I have read Mikyo Dorje's writings in a scattershot sort of way, and gained a bit of experience and knowledge from that. In addition to that, I may not have been able to develop really, true, pure faith and devotion as one should according to the Dharma. But if we speak about it in a worldly way, I do have a bit of faith and attachment of thinking that he is someone who did something for us, who did kindness for us. Perhaps I have a bit of a partiality for him. Also, if we think that we should uphold, preserve, and spread well these teachings of the practice lineage, we need to know what are the origins of the practice lineage. How did the forefathers initially establish the teachings? How did the later masters uphold them? And in the end, how much hardship and effort did they go through to spread them, and so forth? We need to research and study how much work they did for this. And the more we study this, the more we can understand what the majesty and essence and value of this lineage are. So I don't think of my teachings of these biographies this year as merely teaching like the topic of a history class. I don't think of it that way, and I'd ask you also to please not consider it like that either. But I'm not saying that studying history is bad. The reason I'm saying this is that it's because we're Dharma practitioners, and if you're someone who practices the Dharma, no matter what study you do, we shouldn't be merely focused externally on learning a particular thing. We need to at least take some interest in turning our attention inward and seeing what we can do to have an effect on our own mind. And so this is, I thought I had to explain this here at this point. In particular, the real instructions of the great master of the past is not what they wrote on paper that's included in some text. Instead, it is how, throughout their entire lives, how they thought, how they performed their deeds and activity, and so forth. The actual way that they lived their life is the actual instruction that they give. And also, what also determines whether a guru is an authentic guru or not is how the Lama acted and how they thought in their lifetimes. How is it they did what they did? Did it all accord with the Dharma or not? And that is what we need to look at to see whether a guru is authentic or not. In particular, these two autobiographies of Lord Mikyo Dorje do not take it as a given that he was the Karmapa or an emanation of a Buddha or a Bodhisattva or someone who possessed the wisdom, love, and power of the previous Karmapas. When you read these Bodhisattvas, it sounds like he's an ordinary person. As an ordinary monk, how he worked hard to make his life be in harmony with the Dharma. And teaches the reasons and the situations, like gives direct instructions from his own experience during his lifetime. So therefore, these are actually profound instructions on the real practice. And so when I'm saying these instructions, when you should think about, as you listen to the Dharma, please think about what sort of a motivation and comportment you should have and listen well. So now, before I start to actually speak about Mikyo Dorje's life story, I thought it would be helpful to say a bit about how the name Karmapa arose. And what are the reasons and purposes for calling the Karmapa the bearer of the black crown and other such historical background? And so I'll give you, from now on, I should give you some historical background. So when we think about how the name Karmapa was given to the incarnations of the Karmapa, and who the first Karmapa was, there are several different explanations of this in Tibetan histories. To give one example, the great Sakya scholar Mangtuludub Gyaltsen wrote in his Dates of the Great Masters, in which he says, Dusam Khyentse is explained to be an emanation of the sixth Buddha of this fortunate eon, the Buddha Simha. But Karmapakshi is said to be an emanation of Sarha, not the reincarnation of Dusam Khyentse. So I think that the first holder of the black crown should be identified as Karma Pakchi. However, it is clear that the name Karmapa was given to Dusum Khenpa for founding Kampo Nenan in Me, Karma Hlateng in between, and Surpo Monastery in Tu. Therefore, there's a reason for using the name Karmapa for Dusum Khenpa. So this is what he said. And so that's a real gist of what he is saying here. Is that there is no explanation of Karma Pakche being the reincarnation of Dusum Khenpa. So therefore, the first Karmapa must be Karma Pakche. Also, Dusum Khenpa founded the monasteries in Tu in Upper Tibet, Me in Lower Tibet, and between these two, in particular the Karma Hlateng monastery. And so for that reason, he could be called by the name Karmapa. So one could say that the Dusum Khenpa was the first Karmapa, but he was not the actual first Karmapa. The actual first Karmapa should be considered Karma Pakche. So this is what he says. And so as he said this, a lot of other authors didn't do any particular research into that and just followed his opinion. In particular, many Gelugpa scholars have opinions that accord with this. To give one example of that, Tuken Lodzen Chuginima, in his Crystal Mirror of the Philosophical Schools, wrote, "Some say that Pomdrapa student Karma Pakche is a reincarnation of Dusum Khenpa, but he's also known as an emanation of Saraha, and there's no historical source for him being a rebirth of Dusum Khenpa." And so when the masters of the Gelugpas and the Sakya, these great scholars of these schools, and the feeling that I got looking by that is reminded me of a quote from the fifth Dalai Lama. So it just brought it right back for me. Now what he says is, when they get in the middle of the fight between the tigers and lions of the Sakya and Gelug scholars, the fox-like Kaji meditators should be careful. And so that just immediately came right to me. You've got the Sakya and the Gelug scholars are like tigers and lions who are fighting, and the kaiju meditators who don't know anything are like foxes, shouldn't get in between. So it's like that's the feeling I had for it. But I got a bit of confidence, and I think you have to look at it. So I have to give a bit of explanation of this. So in general, So at that time, it was unlike how it was for later Karmapas. There was no tradition of recognizing Karma Pakche as an emanation or reincarnation of Dusum Khenpa and having a formal ritual to install him on the throne. But in actuality, Karma Pakche himself said clearly that he was an emanation or incarnation of Dusum Khenpa. In his autobiography entitled "The Subject of Realizing the Three Times to be Timeless and One, or Perfecting Great Strength," he wrote that in Lord Dusum Khenpa's life story, in a future time, he would appear in the 7 places of a city in Hlotra. Also, when he saw the Dichu, he is reported to have said, "There will be someone who fulfills my intentions." And he said, "The patron Gompa will not enter the true path for 2 or 3 births." And so for these reasons, in order to fulfill these 3 intentions of Dusum Khenpa, though I am now known by the name Karmapa, I have taken birth with mindfulness and awareness in the clan of the emperors of Drilung, a land rich with true Dharma. So what he's saying here is that Dusum Khenpa had left a testament saying, in the future, is saying this will happen. And these predictions. And so in accordance with these prophecies, he took birth. So he had reasons. He explained the reasons for taking birth. And in the very same biography, the beings of the past, known as Dusum Khenpa, and the present stillness Dharmakaya Ranjan Dorje, are different in words and different times, but in actuality, they're the same in essence. And so here, it's Ranjan Pakshi, Dusum Khenpa. So Dusum Khenpa and Ranjan Dorje are the same. all of a sudden, we're getting the languages of the gods and languages of not just the languages of all the humans. So, in any case, Kamapaksha said that in accordance with the testaments of Dusum Khenpa, he took rebirth, and this is very clear. And likewise, he also said after that he and that the previous Dusum Khenpa and the present Rangjung Dorje, which is another name for Karmapakche, their names are a little bit different and they're different times, but in actuality they're one in essence. And so this is what he said. Also, Dusum Khenpa's student Pomdrapa and the master of Karmapakche, there's a biography of Pomdrapa by Karmapakche, within which Karmapakche records Pomdrapa saying, "Last night Dusum Khenpa and the Kajus were all visible above you. You must have the karmic fortune. And today I have a vision of Dusum Khenpa filling all space. You are the fortunate one, so do not go anywhere. Stay here and practice this Dharma of mine." And so what this is saying, Karmapakche, Karmapakche's guru was Pomdrapa, and when Pomdrapa met Dharmapajin, Pomdrapa had many pure visions of Dusum Khenpa. So he said, "You must be a particular student with a great karma. You're a great being." And so this is what Pomdrapa said. Likewise, Karmapakche restored all three of Dusum Khenpa's monasteries and spread the teachings there. And so because of this, it was no different than if Lord Dusum Khenpa himself had gone there. And so thus later followers accepted as well known and undisputed that he was the Nirmanakaya, or emanation, or reincarnation of Dusum Khenpa. And so for this reason, even though at time there was no custom of recognizing tulkus or throning tulkus as we have now, they hadn't developed, but that does not mean that he is not the reincarnation or emanation of Dusum Khenpa. For example, when you read the Jataka tales or stories of the Bodhisattvas, there's no particular identifying a story of anyone identifying the Bodhisattva, saying this is the Bodhisattva, or enthroning the Bodhisattva, but that doesn't mean that they were not incarnations. So generally, the Karmapa is well known to be praised with, and this is said quite often by this, but what is understood about it is that he is the same mind stream of the sixth Buddha, the fortunate Eon. And where this primarily comes from is a prophecy that Lama Zhang revealed at Utah. And this says he is the sixth Buddha, the fortunate Eon. And because it says that, then Lama Shang also himself respected Dusum Khenpa, saying he is the incarnation of the sixth Buddha. So in brief, when we look at the histories and life stories, there was no widespread custom of calling Dusum Khenpa the Karmapa. In the Feast for the Learned and other texts, it is recorded in these texts that are researched and authoritative. It is recorded that when he went forth as a monk, he had pure vision of Dakinis appointing him as the embodiment of the activity of the Buddhas and calling him the Karmapa. When we examine these accounts of pure visions, it seems that there to have been a secret name that was not commonly known. For that reason, Karmapakshin was well known to call himself Karmapa. It seems so. When we examine these accounts, it seems that there's to have been a secret name that was not commonly used. It's really only during the lifetime of Karmapakshi that he became well known by the name Karmapa. And likewise, Karmapakshi himself was known popularly known by the name Karmapakshi. But there are also other instances where the rebirth commonly being known by their predecessor's secret name. For example, Karmapakshi's secret name of Rangchen Dorje became the commonly known name of the third Karmapa, Rangchen Dorje. Rangchen Dorje's secret name, Rolpe Dorje, became the commonly used name of the fourth Karmapa. And there are several other instances of this as well. And so for these reasons, sometimes when you read Karmapakshi and Dorje's works, we often confuse them and they're mistaken for each other's. And the reason for that is both to say that they both would write texts under the name Rangchen Dorje, so they're sometimes mixed up. However, there's another way of explaining this. In Karma Chakma's guidebook to the Kagyu monasteries, it says in this that Karmapakshi was called Karmapa because he stayed at Karma monastery. So there's this one way of explaining it. But when you think about it, if it was said because we were talking about the greatness of Karma monastery, or as we've talked about in terms of being the founder, then it really should be used for the first Karmapa, Dusum Khyentse. You'd think that this would be a name that should be given to the founder, Dusum Khyentse, but it was given to Karmapakshi. So maybe it was because Karmapakshi spent a long time at Karma monastery, or maybe there was another reason. And this is something that should be examined. However, but in the Kamsang histories, I've never seen in these histories of the Karma Kamsan, I've never seen such an explanation. It is in Karma Chakma's guidebook to Kagyu monasteries. Likewise, Mangdaludur Jasa said the Karmapakshi founded the Karma Hlateng, and for that reason was called could have been called Karmapa, but that doesn't work out in terms of the time. Because the Karma Hlateng mountain retreat was founded by Rangchen Dorje. And this is clearly written in Rangchen Dorje's autobiography as well as in other reliable sources. And they all say the same thing. And so there's no dispute about that. So in sum, the main point is that the first one to be commonly known as the Karmapa was Karmapakshi. If we count from the first bearer of the black crown, that would be Dusum Khyentse. And the first one to have been recognized as a tulku was Rangchen Dorje. He was the first recognized as a tulku. So that is how it is. And for these reasons, Dusum Khyentse said that in Surbi here there will be 3 bearers of the black crown. So this is a prophecy that he made. And the point of this, I think, is as what I just mentioned. The reasons that I just mentioned are the points that I mentioned because of that. He said that, I believe. Likewise, Lord Mikya Dorje wrote an explanation of the Yoga Tantra, in which he wrote, "These days in the Dampo Kagyu, Bhutan and Rangchen Dorje are the undisputed eyes of Dharma of both Sutra and Tantra. Of these 2, the latter, known as the omniscient Rangchen Rinpa, was the second to bear the name Karmapa and the third bearer of the black crown." So in the Dampo Kagyu, there were 2 great scholars of Sutra and Tantra. One was the omniscient Bhutan, and one was Rangjung Dorje. And Rangjung Dorje was the second one to be known by the name Karmapa, and the third bearer of the black crown. So I think this is a quote that is very precise about the history. As I said before, he was the first one who was well known by the name Karmapa was Karmapakshi, as I said before. And the second was Rangjung Dorje. In terms of the bearers of the black crown, Rangjung Dorje was the third, Karmapakshi was the second, and Dusum Khyentse was the first. And so this is really talking very precisely about the history. And so I've been saying the bearer of the black crown, the bearer of the black crown several times. And what this is saying is that really what is particular about the incarnations of the Karmapa is wearing the black crown on their heads. And so this is particular. And for that reason, the Karmapa himself would be called the Blackout Lama. And that's where this tradition came from. And so the Karma himself would wear the crown on his head. He'd encourage people to recite the Mani Mantra. And while wearing it, he'd distribute the black pills to the 7 birds. And he would also give other students crowns that the same shape as his own crown, but they were white, yellow, red, or green in color. And so because of these deeds, and because of so they would continue their activity, or we could say their cultural activities would really flourish. So if we want to speak about the black crown, when people who have faith in the Karmapa from a Dharma's perspective, or attachment to him from a worldly perspective, what they think is that even if they do not really know about the symbolism or history of the black crown, will say it is liberation on seeing, or it is sacred. And some people will think that the Karmapa's black crown has no symbolic Dharma meaning. Instead, it was a crown given to him by the Mongol or Chinese emperors. It indicated like a crown of activity, or it was like the Queen of England's crown, a crown that represented his authority and power. And so there are many who think this as well. Still others say that the Karmapa uses the black hat ceremony as a means to get offerings. And so for that reason, the crown itself becomes a tool to accumulate wealth. So there are people who explain that as well. And some people say that the black crown is a hat that doesn't accord with the Vinaya rules. It is a black hat of the Mara Dharmas, so you shouldn't wear it at all. So there are people who say many different things. Well, the reason why there's so many different things is, from one perspective, it is because the Karmapa's black crown became too well known, so it became something that everyone spoke about. And so they can show that, or from another perspective, it's because they don't know the symbolism in history, the actual system in history. And they have many ideas and projections or ideas of their own, they make things up, and so that's why these opinions occur. So when did the black crown or black hat first appear? It was probably first worn at the time of Dusum Khyentse. Here, Tukha Lobsang Chiginima writes in his Crystal Mirror of the Philosophical Schools, "It is said that Dusum Khyentse wore a black crown, so he became known as the bearer of the black crown. However, the Mongol king gave Karmapakshi a black crown of activity, and it was definitely from that point on that the incarnations were known as the bearers of the black crown. These days, the ranks of Chinese ministers are distinguished by the ornaments on their hats. This is a new tradition of the Qing emperors. during the Mongol and Han dynasties, they were distinguished by the shapes of their hats. The imperial preceptors were given black crowns with gold blazons, and it seems that for this reason Emperor Yunglo gave Jamjen Chuje and others such crowns. Therefore, I expect that to say that the black crown of the Karmapas was made from the hair of a trillion Dakinis and offered him, and to proclaim his greatness widely, is solely a made-up tale. He doesn't give any particular reasons for saying this, but he criticizes, saying that the Karmapakshi was only from the time of Karmapakshi. It was not any dharma practice. It was actually a symbol of work, as a sign kind of activity or of work or of rank. If you put emphasis, whether or not there was a tradition in the black crown at the time of Dusum Khyentse, the only way to determine this is to research the reliable old stories of the old masters. We don't have any other method. So within the collected works of Dusum Khyentse, there is a text I've read. It's a short text called The 3 Cycles on Mixing. And so what this text is a disciple of Dusum Khyentse took notes on what Dusum Khyentse himself said. And what that says is, think that above your crown there is a white, swirling moon disk. On top of that, visualize there sits your root guru, inseparable from Dusum Khyentse, with white hair and a black crown, as light and the nature of light. And so that is what is said there. And so for that reason, what this shows us is that from that time on, the students of Dusum Khyentse when they're visualizing Dusum Khyentse during practicing Guru Yoga and so forth, they would visualize him with wearing a black crown. So it shows that there was that tradition of visualizing him in that way from that time. Likewise, in Karmapakshi's autobiography, the subject of realizing the 3 times to be timeless and one, or perfecting great strength, what it says there is, because Lord Dusum Khyentse was blessed as a self-arisen wisdom of an emanation of Indra-Bodhi, in all his disciples' perception, he appeared as inconceivable emanations and displays, like a reflection in a mirror. Because he was the same in essence as Sadaha, as a symbol of the unchanging Brahman nature, he wore a crown of black silk with a gold blaze, such as had never appeared anywhere before on earth, representing the unrisen Buddha through core-emergent wisdom through the various symbols. And so it's basically saying that the crown of black silk or black fabric with a gold blaze that had never been before known in Tibet. And so it says that he wore such a crown. Likewise, Lodamiki Dorje wrote a history of the black crown, in which it says that he gives a quotation from an old biography of Dusum Khyentse, where it says, he wore on his head a black silk crown with designs of mounds of round flowers. And so that he said this is in an old biography. Likewise, many other histories, such as the Feast for the Learned, and these reliable histories, say that when Dusum Khyentse went forth as a monk, he had a pure vision of many thousands of Dakinis tying a black crown to his head, and saying that he was the embodiment of the activity of the Buddhas and giving him the name Karmapa. And so he had this pure vision, and because he saw that later, he took the crown that he saw in his vision as an example and either made or had made a black crown. For not only that, the crown that Dusum Khyentse wore was later kept among the treasures of Tsurphu Monastery. So how do we know that it was kept in the treasury? Mikado Dorje's lama. Mikado Dorje had 4 different lamas, and among them, the one who taught him the great philosophical texts was Karma Trinnepa. And Karma Trinne wrote the questions and response, was the summary of liberation. And what it says there is, some assert that the crown is the empowerment crown of Saraha, and due to that, it is also said to be the hair of 1,000 Dakinis. This is a story of an emanation. It is unconceivable to ordinary individuals. It is said to be in the black treasury of Tsurpo, but in the present day we have not seen it. So he said that. So you're saying that there was this crown of Dusum Khenpa that was made from the hair of a trillion Dakinis, and it is in the treasury of Tsurpo, but I haven't seen it, he said. This is what he's saying there. Likewise, when the 15th Karmapa, Kachap Dorje, enthroned the second Jamgon controller, Khyentse Weser, at Tsurpo, he had the black crown of Dusum Khenpa placed just for a moment on the head of Control. And so as we can see that the crown of Dusum Khenpa, even in later times, was one of the great sacred treasures of Tsurpo Monastery. So, to surprise us, from these, we can infer from these above histories that the black crown worn by the Karmapa dates to the time of the Karmapa Dusum Khenpa, and it was not first offered to him by any patron or king or great person or lama. Instead, it is clear that it is made by Dusum Khenpa himself or made by others at his direction. And so this is very clear. However, one thing that we need to know here is that we always say that we talk of the Karmapa as the bearer of the black crown. We call the crown black. But we're saying this for convenience. It's easier to say, but in actuality, the color of the crown is a deep dark blue or bluish black. It is not completely black. And so the reason why the crown is made like this is primarily connected to the practice of Tantra. In the Turiya Tantra, there are empowerments. Like in the Kriya Tantra, there are the water and crown empowerments. And of them, the hat can be considered a crown for the crown empowerment. So also the crowns can have different colors and shapes in terms of the 5 Buddha families. So here, the Karmapa's crown is to symbolize the family of Akshobhya. It has a Vajra on its blaze, and the dark blue color symbolizes that it is unmoving or unshapable from the Dharma nature. It's just like people use space as a symbol for being unchanging. And so, taking the color of space as an example, and as given the color of being dark blue. And so, for that reason, when we're practicing the Sakta secret mantra, there are extraordinary methods for reversing fixation in ordinary appearance through symbols, meaning, and signs, or through the symbolized and the symbolized. And so, the crown was made in accordance with that, And also there are other explanations of the crown in that way. Now, of these many different explanations of the black crown, one that is still excellent that we can read, and the earliest, is by the 3rd Karmapa, Rangjung Dorje. So I think that is the earliest. And this explanation of the black crown, if I just read this, I thought, what it says here is, Namo Guru, I prostrate to the Lord Gurus. Dakinis, grant your blessings. I shall explain in particular the qualities of this black crown with Garuda wings and gold blaze. The base being slightly dark is a symbol of the unchanging Dharmakaya. The sides being square is a symbol of the four immeasurables. Having two Garuda wings is a sign of the inseparability of means and prajna. Having 3 points is a symbol of the 3 kayas being complete in him. Having 4 colors is a symbol of accomplishing the 4 activities. Being adorned with 5 silks is a symbol of the 5 families dwelling above the head. Having the parasol, sun, and moon is a sign that the Guru is a wish-fulfilling jewel, and always accompanies him, never apart. Having a blaze on the forehead is a symbol of the one Dharma, of knowing the one Dharma that liberates all and understanding everything known to be one. This crown that has these symbols is the empowerment crown of the great Brahman. It was bestowed by the Dakinis. It is the crown of Disimkempa. May those with faith and devotion for this crown meet the glorious Disimkempa. So this is the third Karmapa Rangchen Dorje's description of the black crown. And so for this reason, and so this is explaining the black crown as being connected to the extraordinary tantric methods of reversing fixation through symbolic methods. So I think now we probably need to take the break, right? Yes, we'll take the break. And so we will have a half-hour break. And then I will continue the teaching. Thank you.
So,
I have explained in brief about the origin of the black crown. One of the particular activities of the Karmapa is that it's not just that they wear a black crown. They also perform the special black crown ceremony. So when did this ceremony, the black crown, originate? It's actually difficult to sort of arrange that, to definitely determine that.
At
the time of the, I think that it's recorded in a history written by the 8th Pension that it was during the time of the 7th and 8th Karma, but that's definitely the one earliest time. It's possible that it also occurred earlier. So to speak about the black crown ceremony itself, there is a life story of the 3rd Dalai Lama, Sonam Gyatso, written by the great 5th Dalai Lama, in which he has a short story about wearing the black. The Dalai Lama Sonam Gyatso went to see Wancho Dorje, and at that time, and he said, I would like to see the black crown. And when he said this, the Karma said, usually, is only shown when there are large gatherings of the public or when there are great offerings. It's not, there's no particular history of doing this to private individuals. But if you, the Tulku Rinpoche, would like to see this, I will do this for you. And so he had the black crown brought, and he first had the Karmapa ward on his head. And then, after the Karmapa were said, then the Gyawa Sumijasa made some offerings about that. And after Karmapa had worn the hat, Gyawa Sunamjasa asked, he received the hat in his hands just to look at it. And Gyawa Sunamjasa saw the black crown in the space in front of him. And for that reason, he felt great faith in the Karmapa and his disciples. And so at that time, what the fifth Dalai Lama said is, therefore, there's no certainty that that is untrue, that the black crown is made by the Dakinis. So this is what. And so at that, the fifth Dalai Lama always looked down on the Kajus, but at that time he said, maybe it's possible that it actually was made, the black crown was made by the Dakinis. Maybe it was so. So this is something that he said, and so this is it's like one story that I read. Generally, the ceremony for the black crown has changed many times. In the oral histories from older laws from Supa, that even during the lifetime of just the 16th Karmapa, there are many small changes that were made to the black crown ceremony. The most clear description of the black crown ceremony from the times of the earlier Karmapas is in Siddha Chigijun's autobiography. What he writes is that he saw some notes taken during the time of the 9th Karmapa, which describe how they conducted the ceremony of the black crown. But at this point, I'm not going to recite the entire thing. But the main thing is that when they wear the black crown during the lives of the previous comers, the public were encouraged to recite the Mani mantra, 10 million manas, or to perform life releases, or give up conflict, and inspire them to other virtuous acts. So all over in Tibet, actually, it's not just in Tibet, in all of the Himalayan regions in Nepal and in the Himalayan mountain regions, there's a customs of reciting the manis with a melody, right? And there's also the tradition of carrying a prayer wheel with a mani mantra. And these customs are really very widespread. The reason why the main origin of the reciting the mani mantra and carrying the mani prayer wheel is because during the time of the second Karmapakshi, it came from his time, it is said. And the main reason for this is that the Mahasiddha Karmapakshi's main yidam duty was Red Chenrizik Gyawa Jatso. And because he had a vision, and in that vision, the Dakinis of the 5 families told him they should get large gatherings of the public, recite the Mani mantras with melody. And because of the reciting the Mani mantra, then everyone who sees and hears this will be blessed, we said. So he had that sort of a vision. And so because of that, so wherever Karmapakshi went, he would wear the black crown, sing the mantra melody with a melody, and wear the black crown. This is described in many Dharma histories, in particular the feast for the learned. In particular, according to some more recent histories, when Drogin Chipak went to Mongolia, people would say, Karma Pakshi is nothing but a money reciter. He's nothing else. Drogin Chipak was. They really, the Hor emperors really respected Drogin Chipak, but they said, Karma Pakshi doesn't do anything but recite money. Speaking badly, but in brief, basically the custom of reciting mantras and singing it with a melody, and in particular carrying a mani prayer wheels. These developed in Tibet because Karma Pakshi spread them. As the seventh Panchen Lobsang Tenpa Nyingpa and other scholars and masters have said. Similarly, during the time of the Ming Emperor Yunglu, the fifth Karmapa Deshin Shenpa went to Nanjing. At that time, the main name mantra or Dharma mantra connected to the Karmapa was the Mani mantra. And so when the Chinese first heard the Manis, it seemed really strange to them. It's like, now we talk about these today. It's like there's an English, it's like an English joke. We said, "Oh, money, pay me home." There was a joke. It was similarly for the Chinese at that time. The Chinese would say, "Money isn't something said by the Buddha. It's something that those Westerners, those folks from the West, made up." And so they made a lot of jokes about it. There are quite a few stories about this recorded in the Chinese histories, but it's not time to tell them all today. So basically, for these reasons I've mentioned, we can understand that the Black Crown ceremony aimed at encouraging people to act virtuously. So I think this is the thing we can understand from that. However, the old good traditions have gradually sort of weakened and disappeared. And so it seems like people ceremony, it's just a way to collect offerings. You really can't blame them for it. And so because of this, it is important for us to we need to think about what the intentions or aims of the previous Karmapas were and understand this without any mistake or error. So the black crown that was actually worn during the black crown ceremonies during the time of Dusum Khenpa and Karma Pakshi, those fabrics were basically sewn from black fabric. And they didn't have any jewels or any other adornments. For example, the crown of the Mahasiddha Karma Pakshi, it is that Karma made out of ordinary materials, and there's nothing particularly amazing about it. Later, the Yuan and Ming emperors made many offerings to the Karmapas. And because of these many offerings, it was said in Tibet, there was this saying, the Karmapa's wealth has no limit, it said. And the meaning of that is that the various incarnations of the Karmapas collected many treasures from the Chinese and Tibetan and Mongolian kings. And so they received so many offerings. And so this is why it said that the Karmapa's wealth has no limit. But most of these precious sacred treasures were mostly lost during the war with the Mongolian Goshri Khan. And everything was lost during the Cultural Revolution. There was a little bit left during the time of the 16th Karmapa. The 16th Karmapa, the 16th Karmapa was able to bring to Rumtek, and so it's his kindness that we have lit. But right now, that's all locked up in Rumtek, and we can't see them. And so this is that unfortunate situation. So we in the Karma Kamsa should really take to look back at our history. And we should, learn from our losses and learn from our mistakes and take the lessons. This is what it's important for us to do this, but it doesn't seem like many people are actually doing this, as I see it. Generally, when you look at the histories in the Bhagavad, offered by the many crowns were offered by the Mongolian and Chinese emperors. But basically, there are primarily two that we can really clearly identify. And the way we know this is from Karma Trinipa's Questions and Responses, a Summary of Liberation. What it says in this text is, it's very clearly said here, what he says, in the encampment now, there was one made of the Mongolian fact, the Mongol Emperor Timur Khan offered to Rinpoche Dorje, and one called Zamni Yesha, studded with many jewels, given by the Chinese Emperor Qingha to Lord Tongwu Dindan. So there are these two. And so he's saying that there are two crowns. And when you read the lives of the previous Karmapas, it is often said that they wore the crown meaningful to see, or the crown Zamni Yesha. It's often said this. So if we can sort of like infer from this that there were two different crowns that were used in the Black Crown ceremonies. But as to when the 16th Karmapa traveled around the world and wore the black and gave the ceremony. So which of these two crowns was it? So this is something that we just can't really determine at the present. And the old lamas from Serpo would say, so they say this quite a bit. But it's like sometimes they have a lot to say, but you're not always certain whether they have a source for that. They have so much that they actually can say. But what they say, the crown that the Karmapa wore is the one offered by Yunglo. So that's what they say. But there are several life stories of the fifth Karmapa Deshin Shekpa. But the one that is probably the most reliable and most authentic is the one written by his own disciple, Tsubo Jamyang Chenpo. And what is written in that one is that before the Ming Emperor Yunglo met the Karmapa, he had a dream. And in the dream, what he saw is that before him in the sky, there was the Buddha Ratnasikeng. So this Buddha, surrounded by many bodhisattvas as a retinue. This is what he saw in his dream. And then immediately, the Buddha turned the guru from the west. So when you say the west, that means the west. And we say west, that means Tibet, because it's the west of China. So this means the Karmapa. The Buddha became the Buddha and wearing the black crown. So he had this vision. So later, when he actually met the Karmapa, the opinion of the Karmapa that he'd seen in his dream were exactly the same as the actual Karmapa. And so the emperor was just delighted to see this, and offered him wrote a praise called the the praise entitled the Ratnasikeng adorned with the jewels, and drew a painting of this. And not only that, the emperor made a declaration of the Karmapa's title, giving him particular titles and great names. So giving him basically the same titles as had been given to Drogden Chubak during the time of the Yuan emperors, such as the titles such as Precious King of Dharma and so forth. They're basically the same titles. But he added one word, the word Deshin Shekpa. And the reason that he added this is because that in his
가라 린젠 쪽도 사는데 지금 미놈 총이 민자 디긴 산때는 디신시가 사
of the
지금
Vasikan adjoined to the truth. And so for that reason, he added this word. And so because of that, the fifth Karmapa became commonly known all over in all countries by the name Deshin Shekpa. But up to that point, he was actually not called Deshin Shekpa. However, these are all very clear. But there is no historical record of him being of the emperor offering a crown at that time. So I have to say sorry to the old lamas from Surpo. Another thing that the what the old Surpo lamas say is that there was a Zhang crown offered by the king of Zhang, which is a little bit more blue than the present crown. But when the 16th Karmapa left Tibet, and he left it in Tibet, and it was lost during the Cultural Revolution, so there's no way to know where it is at the present. But however, in the life stories of the Karmapas, I haven't seen any articles, any references to him, the Zhang Komnisha offering the blue coffin, a golden crown. So there are kinds of him offering a golden crown, not any blue one. So I think that if I guess from that I think it's possible that the crown that remained at Tibet may have. Well, but I'm not about it 100. And anyway, generally, the Ming Emperor Yunlong also gave Jiangchen Shiji a crown that was black and had the shape of the 5 families. So is that also a crown? So it was the same color as the Karmapa's crown, but the shape was different. Likewise, the first Agoshi Gyaltsen Palja Dundrup was given by the Ming Emperor Shangde a black crown. When Agoshi Palja put this on, he looked too similar to his guru, and he's thinking this, and so he offered it as a sacred relic inside a statue. And this is clearly indicated in the histories. So for this reason, just because a crown is black does not necessarily mean that it is the same as the Karmapa's black crown. In brief, Dusum Khenpa and Karmapakshi had a custom of wearing the black crowns. And the ones that were later given by the Chinese and Mongolian emperors took the same shape and color, but they made it a bit more elaborate. And they added a lot of different jewels and decorations and adornments. And they used better materials and made it of higher quality. Other than that, but even before the Chinese and Mongolian emperors offered the crowns, there were black crowns. But people just don't understand this. But people think that when you ask why is it so important, people say it's just because jewels and stuff. It's really beautiful. They explain it like that. But when we look at this, it's kind of like the same as the saying about when you're making sandalwood into charcoal to sell it. So it's like important for us to really know the actual situation and when we have faith. Otherwise, so if we just sort of not really know, be ignorant of ourselves and say various things to other people, then other people are just going to laugh. It isn't something that has any reasons or any actual basis. It's like today, I'm just telling stories all day long. You can't really say they're just stories, but okay. So now, also there's the name Karmapa, which is like a name mantra or a supplication to the Karmapas. And so we can also say that this is particular peculiarity of the Karmapa. But when did the Karmapa Keno originate? It's difficult to determine exactly when that happened, because it gradually spread among the public who had faith in the Karmapa. And there's no other way to specifically point out one person who began it, said, this is the person. And so it's difficult for this reason, it's difficult to really say exactly. In Tibet, from ancient, and we can understand this from the Dunhuang manuscripts. If we look at them, we can see this. When Buddhism spread in Tibet, eventually there are the phrases, the three jewels note, or the three jewels view us with compassion. They did appear. Likewise, once the Karmapa's name became well known, people began to call him out by name and say, you please see, please view me. And so there's this way of calling to him. And these days, there are some Chinese Dharma friends who think that Karmapa is the Karmapa's name. I think they actually think this. And so when they call me by name, they say Karmapa. Ken from Karmapa, what it means is like saying, please look at me, protect us, look at my joys and sorrows, please watch over us. And so that's what it means. And so basically, it's a supplication. I've seen a text that was printed during the Ming Dynasty called The Images and Name Mantras of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. And what it has is on top, there is a picture of a drawing of Karmapa Deshin Shekpa. Below him in Chinese, it says, the essence of the Karmapa or Guru, precious Guru, King of Dharma, is Om Mani Padme Hum. And then to the left of that, in Lensa script, it reads Om Kama Guru Namo, Om Mani Padme Hum. And in the lower right, in Tibetan script, it says homage to the Lord of Dharma Karmapa, Om Mani Padme Hum. And so for this reason, as I said before, so from the time of Karma Pakshe onward, the practice of the Mani Mantra, that activity of this continued at least until the fifth Karmapa Deshin Nyingpa. And so until that point, the Mani Mantra was used as the Karmapa's name mantra, as a supplication. Then later, it gradually changed to being Karmapa Cheno, and this is used as substitute for that as a name mantra for the Karmapa. So the earliest extant experience of occurrence of that we can see is for the eighth Karmapa Mikya Dorje's fourth session Guru Yoga. And so this is like the clearest instance of it. Likewise, in Karma Chakma's Mountain Dharma, the advice for mountain retreats, what it says is, as for the supplication to the Guru, or in supplication to the Karmapa, means lay or activity in Tibetan. The translation, the meaning is the activity of all Buddhas. Therefore, all the Gurus of the lineage have solely accomplished the activity of the Buddhas, so it is permissible to recite Karmapa Cheno. And so what it is saying, so that in general, when we say Karmapa, name of the Karmapas, but sometimes the names, the followers of the Karmapas. So do you Karmapas? There's something that's so like a way of calling the followers of the Karmapas. In modern times, in the later times when the Karma-san teachings declined, and later that in the region of Lhasa, they'd stopped saying, most people wouldn't say karmapa, they would say karmawa. And so that's how they called it karmawa instead of karmapa. And still, and then there are people who won't even say karmawa, who just say karma. And they even drop the wa. And so that also happens. And some scholars say that this is a way of kind of deprecating way of saying the name or diminishing way of saying it. But if we look at it in terms of when we think about it, everyone who accomplished the activity of a Buddha can be called the karmapa, or the embodiment of the activity of the Buddhas. And so for that reason, anyone who is an authentic guru is someone who accomplishes the activity of the guru. And so you can call them karmapa and say karmapa cheno. And you can use it as a supplication for all gurus. I think it's fine to do that. And so Karma Chakmi says this. And so for this reason, when we recite the supplication karma bhajana, if we keep that meaning in mind as we recite it, I think it's good. If we say karma bhajana, the karmapa is like unilaterally, solely the few particular individuals in the lineage of the karmapas. Instead, we should think about it as all the root and lineage gurus. And all of the spiritual friends of all the Buddhist teachings, all of the gurus and spiritual friends in Tibet, they're all solely people who accomplish the activity of the Buddha. And so I think there's no reason why we shouldn't be able to recite Karma Bhajana as a supplication to all of them. And so for that reason, so from now on, at this point, that's what we have for now. So in generally, the time So I'm getting a little bit confused thinking about the different time zones. There are too many time zones. We're supposed to have another half an hour of time. However, we don't need it. So maybe if you all, it's probably better if you all can get to bed earlier. I think it's fine. So from tomorrow, we'll start at the same time from tomorrow. And we'll have an hour for the first session, and then we'll have the half-hour break, and then we'll get together and have like a half an hour, 45 minutes. And I think if we do it this way, I think it'll be okay. So I think we can say that this is enough for today. It's the first day. So it probably hasn't turned out all that well because it's the first day. We've had problems, but I hope that we'll get better every day. And so now we'll recite the dedication and aspiration prayers.